Hi, people. My name is Arsen, and today we're recording a new episode of our brand new podcast called Tramp Chronicles. And today we have a great guest with us, Zachary Taylor, or Zak Taylor. And no, it's not one of the American presidents. It's one of the greatest human beings I know, one of the greatest transportation and city activists. So Zach is, like I said, an activist. He likes cities, transportation, and he is also a formal and informal leader of the activist group called Strong Towns Fargo chapter. And it's great to have him here. Welcome, Zach.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arsen. I think this is probably the coolest set I've ever been on, and I'm so glad I got access to it. But yeah, seriously, thank you for all of the nice words you had to say. I think that sums me up quite well. You call me Zach. No, I was named after the president, but I am not the president, both president of the United States.
This is awesome. It's actually my first time recording, this type of podcast just live, not on Zoom, and I think it's going to be a lot of engagement.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm trying to be open with everyone who's watching, so I prepared a few questions for Zach, and he doesn't know all of them. He kind of read through them, but he doesn't. He doesn't.
Quick
he doesn't
skim.
know anything. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, just to learn a little bit more about what you do and what you're interested in. If someone met you on a walk through your favorite street, how would you introduce yourself beyond just your title and job title?
Yeah, honestly, I guess I was riding my bike back from work today, and I guess this is a good example. So I biked past this guy, and I just started chatting him up about bikes because he was also on a bike, and eventually I just kind of introduced myself as probably someone, I'm part of a local group, Strong Towns Fargo, really an advocate for cities and human scale cities and livable cities, walkability, bikeability, I guess anything like that. So, honestly, yeah, I've started introducing myself more as the Strong Towns Fargo guy, more than like an electrical engineering major at NDSU. I guess it really depends, but pretty much anyone I talk to these days is definitely I introduce myself as affiliation with Strong Towns. So
I think this is brilliant for anyone who's listening or watching. Zach actually is this multimodal guy, as I call him, because he just uses all the greatest and I don't want to say weirdest, but in a good way, types of transportations. I don't know. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I met Arsen here today, I showed up on a one wheel, which is like an electric, not a unicycle. It's like a unicycle, but it's got a go-kart wheel instead of a bike sized wheel, and it's electric. So they go like 15, 20 miles an hour, just like 30 kilometers an hour top speed. So, yeah, they're pretty fun. It's more like you're riding a snowboard rather than like a skateboard or anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It was like he was flying into the studio, and it was amazing.
And I guess I also have like a bike, an e-bike, car. I'd rather not own that one, but you know how it is.
Yeah. In the car-centric America, United States, it's hard not to own one.
Yeah.
So you mentioned these two magical words, strong towns, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about Strong Towns.
So Strong Towns is a national, I guess, semi-international organization that basically advocates for walkable, financially resilient, and safe cities, human-centric cities, rather shifting that focus of U.S. cities from car dependency to human centricity, I think is probably the best way to put it. There's a lot of other like ins and outs of kind of their policy, but at a broad look at it, they're really trying to redefine city building in the US and kind of bring cities back to the people and roads back to people instead of cars.
Right.
That whole ideology.
Yeah, and I know that your major is not anything related to planning. Oh, it kind of is in some ways. You can connect it,
Yeah.
but it's electrical engineering, and it's far from urbanism and planning and transportation. So, what kind of brought you into that
So
area?
yeah, I guess studying engineering, it's definitely like, okay, how can we solve a problem as efficiently as possible, as safely as possible, as ethically as possible? When I look at US cities, I don't see any of that, I guess. That's kind of what brought me in. I mean, other than Not Just Bikes, I started watching YouTube, Not Just Bikes, and that's what really kind of pushed me to this. But I've always had a fondness for cities and I guess density and probably human centricity. And yeah, with the whole engineering thing, it's definitely not. I always tell people I couldn't be a city planner. I mean, maybe I could, but I wouldn't. I don't think I'd want to. I don't think I'd
Right.
want to be like a civil engineer.
Mhm.
Um, so that's. I mean, I like electricity. I like electronics, and I think applying those engineering skills to city building and advocacy is what I like to do with it.
Right. No, that's actually a smart connection to electrical engineering. You
Yeah.
just you think that kind of way, and you
Oh
kind of
yeah.
relate it to your activism in terms of urban planning and urbanism. But it's also, you mentioned that it's hard to be a planner and activist at the same time. That's what I've been practicing. It worked out, but sometimes it can be the conflict of interest because you work on things and then you kind of at some point when you work on some projects at any city, right? And you're a planner and you want to be an activist, it might be a conflict of interest one day.
Yeah, great thing about electrical engineering is there's no conflicts of interest with city
Right.
planning. So that's another huge bonus.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned Not Just Bikes. It's crazy. Big shout out to Not Just Bikes. One day when our podcast is big and popular, maybe the creator of Not Just Bikes will watch it and say thank you. But that's, I think, every time when I talk to someone like you or someone who got interested
Oh yeah.
in urbanism and activism, they said that they started with Not Just Bikes. It's kind of crazy because not very sophisticated content, right? But just the way the guy talks about cities and transportation
Oh
is
yeah.
is crazy. Is
Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
he has a great voice. I mean, for one thing, I mean, I can butter him up I can only butter him up so much, but
Yeah,
I think the way he puts things in perspective is is just missing from a lot of YouTube and a lot of discussions about US cities. It's stuff that people have criticized before, but it's not all been really consolidated and shown so uh vividly, I guess, in one single YouTube channel or one single video.
absolutely. Yeah, it's great. If you haven't looked at Not Just Bikes and are interested in urbanism in cities, it would be I would be kind of interested how you didn't get into that at this point, but it's our big recommendation. You have to
Yeah.
do this. Okay, all right. Let's get to our second. There are prepared questions and there are questions that I kind of improvise to create. Trying to be as open as possible. So was there a book maybe or I don't know, a street corner or a bus ride or a bike ride that first pulled you into the world of urbanism or I mean you mentioned Not Just Bikes obviously, but maybe there was something else, kind of the all stars gathered together and you're here talking
Yeah.
about urbanism.
Oh yeah. Um yeah, so when I first moved to Fargo for college, I was just moving in to new dorm here at NDSU. Roll Herd, by the way. Um, yeah, so I was just moving in with my whole family was here. We had to pick a couple things up from Walmart down just outside the city, and then we, drove back to the dorm, got everything settled in, and we finally decided to go, out for dinner at that point. And I've not really been downtown Fargo. This is probably my first time actually looking at observing downtown Fargo. I hadn't been to Fargo for a while before this. Anyway, we end up downtown. We go to a restaurant, and as soon as we get there and actually get out the car, believe it or not, I notice just that I notice I feel just so well. I don't know, welcome. Like I feel safe. I feel invited. Like downtown Fargo is not, you know, it's not the pinnacle of downtowns, but I mean, it's pretty good. I would argue it's pretty decent for, especially around where we are in the United States. Um, but Broadway Fargo has the design ideology of like every urban center, probably anywhere. You have buildings right up to the sidewalk. You have sidewalks. You have streets. You have human centricity. This was right after Broadway Square was built too, and I've not seen something like that. That's the only example of a public square, essentially, where people actually can sit and talk, and is actually a third place in probably North Dakota. I mean, that's probably the only example you'll find in North Dakota here.
Absolutely, and you kept mentioning this word Fargo, and a lot of people are listening to this and they're like, "Oh yeah, we watched that movie about crime and a lot of bad things." But actually, Fargo is the biggest city in the state of North Dakota. North Dakota is one of the smallest states in the United States. It's considered to be a rural state.
Yeah.
And Fargo is kind of this most urbanized city in North Dakota, and Broadway is its central street, and I think Broadway is a central street in a lot of American cities. So when you hear Broadway somewhere, it's not just Broadway in New York City. It's considered the central part of town, and if you think of any European cities, Broadway Plaza, right? It's called that you mentioned, is like the very minimalistic version of European plazas with some castle in the middle. That one's just like a third place. A third place is actually the place where you go. That's not your work or your home, right? That's where you can meet random people. That's the beauty of any city. And since we started about the locations, right? Well, first of all, I'd like to, so you understand what Fargo is. If you think of any Ukrainian city, it's something close to, Kolomia, maybe Ivano-Frankivsk. Those are the Ivano-Frankivsk region cities, just for the reference. So you mentioned the locations. It's really interesting because when I think of Ukrainian cities, a lot of this reminds me of Fargo reminds me of a lot of Ukrainian cities, and Bismarck, which is the state capital. That's where you're originally from.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Bismarck and now live in Fargo, and how's it like? Those are pretty different places.
Yeah, Fargo, I mean, just is a lot flatter. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. But Bismarck, every time I go back to Bismarck after spending a lot of time in Fargo and kind of looking into like how cities are laid out and walkability and all of this stuff, I really find that Bismarck has a lot of good roots and really good potential. It's something that, I mean, just fascinates me that not more is being done with it. Growing up in Bismarck, coming to Fargo, it's definitely a bit of a shock. It's like actually Fargo feels like a big city in comparison to Bismarck. It's about twice the size, population wise, probably 4 times the size, actual area wise.
It's like 200,000, right? Around that.
Yeah, the metro here is like 250. Mm-hmm. It's actually probably 270 now,
right?
Which is pretty decently sized.
Mm-hmm. And you can actually see people outside.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
In Bismarck.
Yeah, Bismarck, the only people you're going to see, you don't see, I mean, around the mall and like downtown, of course. But besides that, it's like, there's not a whole lot of places. I mean, by the river too, but besides that, there's not a whole lot of people walking around.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's definitely I've been to Bismarck once, and
Yeah.
I mean I live in Fargo now, moving very soon, but it's a good sized and just great city in terms of, a lot of things. But I'm just curious, about your activism part, because you use a lot of modes of transportation,
Yeah.
and you wish you could use more.
Yeah.
And we have the little trams here.
Yes.
So what is your perception about you know public transit, biking, um, something that could exist but doesn't exist in North Dakota, first of all, but just in the US overall?
Yeah. Every time I travel between Bismarck and Fargo, I think, why can't I just ride a train? And even if there were a train, it'd be like probably 70 miles per hour top speed.
Mhm.
Um, why can't I ride a light rail, a tram, a frequent bus, anywhere in my city? And feel why does it feel dangerous to travel in my city? I feel like there's a fundamentally missing, you know, a few fundamentally missing modes of transportation here in the US. And it's not just my feeling, it's fact as well. I mean, US cities see transportation as a financial burden. They don't see it as an asset to their city.
Mhm.
They don't invest in public transit. They rip it up in favor of car centricity. It's it's probably the most unfortunate thing I've seen. And after being to New York, which is the best public transit you'll find in the States, um, it really just opened that was probably the thing that really opened my eyes to everything. That was before I got into the whole Strong Towns thing. But for $3, which is an expensive fare anywhere in Europe, um, you can get anywhere in Manhattan, which is like unheard of
True.
in the US. And it's unfortunate because I mean, if New York had gone a different way, I mean, all of Manhattan would probably be bulldozed and turned into parking lots by now.
Yeah. Yeah, the modernist, urbanism, or modern urbanism, was a thing back in the day, and there were plans about Paris and
Yeah,
about New York. Thankfully, it didn't come to life, and didn't come true.
yeah,
But I think that's just crazy that people even thought about those things. And
yeah.
I don't know. Let's imagine this thing. Let's imagine. Um, well, before I ask you this question, just to add to what you said, it's actually interesting because there's a lot of money in the United States, and you can fund basically whatever you want. But um, you know, all levels of government don't choose to do this. In Ukraine, it's the other way around. We have a lot of demand. People want and know how to use transit, but we have some management issues sometimes, and we have funding issues,
Mhm.
of course, and a whole lot of things. But that's just so interesting that it's kind of the other way around.
Yeah,
And of course it's sad to see about what you said, that people don't prioritize funding public transit. Although I think it will change. I'm optimistic about it.
yeah.
Um, but here's the question. So let's imagine you were the transportation king of the United States. Um, what would be your first three decisions?
First three decisions. If I were the transportation king, I'd probably just start with bus service right away. I mean, that's the quickest implementation you could do to a city. Um, I guess maybe in no particular order, these top three things.
Sure.
First, um, Strong Towns is big into like removing parking minimums, having better zoning laws. I think if you were to overnight pick one thing and implement that, that could really change a lot of this would be updating zoning laws, removing parking minimums. If I were to, I guess my top three things would be remove parking minimums, probably, update zoning codes, and yeah, just implement more funds into transit and actually fund it and view it and look at it as an asset.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think you'd make a great transportation king.
I like to think so, but I don't know. I couldn't actually sit there and plan that stuff out.
Right.
I mean, you're actually someone who studies that, so
Right. Yeah.
I,
You
I
never
look up
know.
to you in that way. Like
Yeah.
this person actually knows what they're talking
Yeah. Not every time, not particularly, but I really appreciate that. Yeah, well, this is awesome. You know, it's a more of a philosophical question, right? But if if a person in if North Dakota were a person, right, and it was trying to get somewhere without a car, what kind of personality would it be? Friendly, clumsy, adventurous, or indifferent? Or maybe something else that you think
about. Probably clumsy and frustrated. Yeah, I think. I mean, I the way I see people treat me just on a bike, and almost always it's someone in a car and not actually out and about on their feet or on a bike. It, I mean, this is something that I'm not the only one who experiences this, but people are rude to people biking or people walking. It's it's unfortunate. So yeah, if North Dakota were probably anyone without a car, I mean, I'd like to think that people would be a bit more open to actually seeing maybe how difficult it is to move around their city without a car. I don't even think I think if I like to think that's probably my most positive outlook on it is that people would be like, actually, this is something that needs to change.
of?
Do I think that's the case? Just looking at people who live here, no, because I think you'd actually have to show them something that works. I think they would have to see a walkable city working in Fargo before they'd agree that a walkable city is worth their time. Which is, yeah, the hardest thing to get across to people, like, and really kind of change people who are set in their ways.
I would absolutely agree with it, but when I'm thinking about this, and I lived here for less than a year,
Yeah.
and I haven't been to a whole lot of locations here in North Dakota, but I would add adventurous too, because there's so much you can meet on the way, even in
Oh yeah.
like bigger cities. Um, so it kind of leads to my next question. Do you have any crazy transportation story that you experienced? Maybe you were, riding a bike and someone, I don't know, tried to cut you off or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
I mean, riding my bike in the unprotected bike lanes we have here in Fargo is dangerous, and often you are faced with harassment from people in vehicles. And not even necessarily the people driving the vehicles. Like I've had passengers of cars lean out their windows and yell. I can't remember what they yelled at me, but just make, you know, just loud noises at me as they drove by. It's like all I'm doing is riding my bike. I've had people, while also in the bike lane, rev their engines past me to prove that they are more manly or more well off than me. And I just think it's so unfortunate because it's in no way, shape, or form how you would act in person to that
Absolutely.
to someone.
Mhm.
You would not if you were walking by someone or biking past someone, would you just yell at them like randomly? Like I guess I don't understand. Cars, and this is something that not just I'm covering, a lot of people have covered before me, but
Mhm.
cars are isolation boxes. Like it's so obvious to see if you're anywhere on a bike, if you're anywhere just walking that, isn't an urban center. You're looked at as weird, and people in their cars before even talking to you judge you based on whatever transportation you're using that isn't a car.
Mhm. It is kind of interesting because I looked at this study, I think the other month, and it shows the car pride statistics.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, actually. And what it showed was that people in poorer countries and third world countries, when you get a car, you're very proud. So your so-called car pride index is high. Although there was one caveat to that study. And there was one country that was not developing or third world. And I think you're guessing what country it is.
Yeah, probably guess.
Yeah, it's Germany. No, I'm kidding. It's the United States. Why do you think that is?
I guess why people.
Yeah, why do people love cars here so? I mean, the obvious answer would be obviously it's very car centric, right?
Yeah.
But I can never explain when someone is wants to ride to work every day on a big ass truck, and it doesn't go anywhere outdoors or whatever what those cars are for.
Yeah,
but it just goes somewhere close, because our everyday kind of migration is 15 minutes here and there, 20-minute rides.
Yeah, I mean, so why is car culture so big in the US essentially?
Yeah.
Honestly, the origins of that, I mean, it really started when people, you could almost trace all of this back to like just how cars are advertised in the US and how much automakers have lobbied the US government into kind of really making everything for the car and bowing down to it. I think when automakers saw the potential for how much money they could make by selling vehicles and how everyone could live in this perfect world and really pushing for that, I think, I say perfect in quotation marks. I think it really spawned this car culture that is innate in a lot of Americans. Like, car culture is huge in the States. It is something that you will see everywhere, even in Manhattan, the most dense urban center in the US. Cars are a status symbol for a lot of people. And this is something, I mean, you and I have talked about before, Arsen, with people who, coworker who lives down in Horace, which is just south of Fargo here, how there's this rat race, as you described it to me. And I've not heard the term rat race before. I mean, I probably had one, but the way I think that's a very like innate way of thinking in a lot of people. And I think with cars being so easily accessible in the US that is just transferred to a larger material object. But that doesn't change the fact that cars are this status symbol. If you see your neighbor with a better car, a lot of the times people will be jealous or, have to feel like they need to get the next newest car, or the next biggest car, and everyone wants to. Individuality is also a huge thing, I think, to most people across the world, but also especially here, independence and individuality is really the basis of a lot of ways Americans think and look at things. And that same thing can be applied to vehicles as well, where it's people want their own car. They want their car to match their personality. And I think as more people drive and ended up not actually talking to their neighbors, this car culture almost turns into like a personification. Their cars turn into a personification of themselves. It's a way of expression.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of this guy that I saw. There were a lot of memes about this, that he loved his car actually, and it was just hilarious. So literally, a guy was in love with his car and like married the car or something. That's how big it is.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to shame anyone who has a car, who owns a car, because it's not people who who just choose to buy cars, although there are a lot of them who do, but it's car centrism that actually makes people buy cars.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big issue. I also think that, you mentioned individualism, and a lot of times when I talk to people who love their cars, they say the word freedom to me, and I'm like, okay, let's just talk about, within cities. We don't have to talk. Maybe yes, you would have more freedom when you travel outside your city, but for your everyday life, let's talk freedom, right? You have to have uh, uh, a driver's license. You have to take care of your car, a lot of maintenance. The car itself costs a ton of money, and you're stuck in traffic jams every day. Where's freedom? And then you have your bike. No driver's license, at least in the United States. As far as I know, right? Or
Yeah.
bike
Yeah.
license, no bike
No
license.
bike license.
Yeah, you don't have to. It doesn't cost you that much, unless it's some electrical bike. But it's even that doesn't cost as much. You don't have to maintain it that much, right? And you can get past all the cars if the infrastructure allows you to.
Yeah.
Which Fargo has some, but if you want to touch on that one, it's good too.
Yeah. So in the US, cars are almost in almost every city in the US are essentially the only viable means of getting around your city. So yes, I would argue that cars are freedom in a lot of the US cities. And I do understand that perspective. I really do. Because when I got my license and could drive, it's like, yeah, actually,
Right.
I do feel free. The whole issue of that is that you're looking at it so myopically. You're looking at it from one perspective. It's yeah, if everything's built for the car, then a car is freedom. But if you just shift your perspective a little bit and look, well, actually, maybe we could build a bike path here. Or maybe we could build a walking path or sidewalks and a buffered protected bike lane. I mean, all of these different things would make it feel safer, make it easier to bike around. Um, yeah, when you talk bike infrastructure in Fargo that you just asked, it's okay. I think when compared to Bismarck, it's a lot better. It's actually substantially more impressive. Um, I do see people biking quite a bit downtown. It kind of baffles me, especially this summer. I feel is the most bikes I've seen ever in this city, and I've only been here for 2 years, but it feels like a substantial increase from when I moved here.
Yeah, it seems like Amsterdam in North Dakota.
Yeah, almost
We
does.
talked about this. Yeah,
It's.
it's fun.
I mean, obviously, you don't have like 100 bikes on a bike path, but I mean, you see people on bikes, and it's cool. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see that, especially when you see children biking, because every time in my planning work, and I mean we talked about this a lot
Mhm.
as well. If you want to build quality bike infrastructure and you actually want to get people use that infrastructure, you should make it so a 5-year-old is comfortable biking on
Yeah.
that. Although, if you have nothing and you don't have a lot of money and you kind of want to introduce the bike infrastructure, just conventional bike lanes, which means just draw a line on the road, it's better than nothing. So 100 conventional bike lanes is better than 10 protected bike lanes because it kind of creates the connectivity. And the more people use it, the more people appreciate it, and there will be more demand for better bike infrastructure in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you brought up the designing a bike lane for 5-year-olds, I mean, this is a design philosophy that I truly stand by, and believe that every city planner in the United States should adopt, yesterday. But yeah, when I look at a bike lane that people expect you to use, or sidewalk, or anything, the danger of an adult riding in that bike lane is oftentimes immense. Like you're 3 feet, 4 feet, maybe 4 or 5 feet away from 30 plus mile per hour traffic in a lot of cases here in Fargo. And when I look at a bike lane that could have been implemented so much better for not much more. It's unfortunate to me that it wasn't designed with children using it in mind, with people's children. And a lot of things you'll hear too here, in the US as well, is that bringing your children out for a bike ride or allowing them to bike places is dangerous, and that you're an irresponsible parent for allowing them to do that. And it's so crazy to me because cars are also the number two killer, I guess, if you don't. It's a weird statistic, but it's the highest killer of children essentially in the US. I mean, it kills more kids. Cars kill more kids than cancer does in this country.
Oh,
and
that's crazy.
And nobody bats an eye.
Yep.
I mean, we look at how much funding and resources we pour into finding treatments for cancer and cancer research, but that same philosophy is not designed or not applied to something that is killing more people and more children. It's baffling.
I absolutely agree. And whenever I get to that conversation with someone who's, who hasn't heard of urbanism or, activism in that area, it's really crazy to me when I, talk about this. And just one example again, and I don't want to, sound harsh or, say something less about, the tragedy that happened, but I think a few months ago there was a plane crash in Washington D.C. and literally the whole world talked about this, and huge tragedy. A lot of people died. Unfortunately, it's a sad moment. Although on that specific date, I looked online and just out of curiosity, I searched car crashes, right? And you wouldn't have something that would show you how many car crashes. Probably you would have the statistics, right?
Right.
But
yeah.
you wouldn't have some source that would show all the car crashes that happened. And all the local news would show me, oh, 2 people died here or 3 people died here, because of cars. And the number would add up, and it would be very, very close to what happened in DC. But there's a difference. It's how the human mind works.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And excuse me. And we see this, and the whole world is talking about this. But yeah, locally, hey, it's normal. I mean, that's how our society works, and it shouldn't be the case. The case should be, hey, 2 people died on that road. Let's redesign it. At least after that, although it should be before that.
Yeah.
But that's at least how it works in a lot of places in the U.S. specifically.
Right. Yeah. And that's just, I mean, it's human psychology. People are more like, it's harder to be proactive than it is reactive. And in the US, people are very reactive, and oftentimes even not as much as they should be. I mean, if someone's killed at an intersection, nobody will do anything. So even under those, definitions, are they really reactive as well? But yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point where a plane crash one day will kill as many people as cars will in that same day. But we treat cars as this norm of day-to-day life. We treat them as, yes, they're dangerous. Yes, they will kill you. But that's okay. Like, we just accept that as being okay. One kind of, I like to bounce around numbers in my head a lot, so this is kind of like, a bit maybe grotesque. I mean, I don't know. Okay, I'll just say it. A human life on average contributes about 10 million US dollars to the economy or the society over the course of their lifetime, which is the kind of grotesque part, is putting a value on human life. But if you were to say, let's do this, I don't really like doing it, but it's kind of something that, if we're going to let 40,000 people be killed by cars every year in this country, maybe I can put a number on something like this. Yeah, let's just say every single person who's killed by a vehicle would have contributed $10 million of benefits to society. in their lifetime. 40,000 people, all who have the potential of producing $10 million of benefit to society, is a $400 billion loss annually to the United States. For a country that's $36 trillion in debt, I think that would probably be something to bat your eye at. I think like
Absolutely.
that might be something that we shouldn't just take at face value as, yeah, people are going to be killed. Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. No, there actually is something you can do about it, because for the developed countries, the U.S. is the highest like mortality rate for vehicles, and not by just a little bit, by like twice as much as the next down, which I think is like Canada or something. It's Canada. As car centric as Canada is, the U.S. is 3 times as dangerous to drive a car. It's just a fundamentally poor design philosophy and design choice, and there's really no way of getting around it except for advocating it, being a voice for change, which is kind of where I step into this whole thing.
Absolutely. And just to end it on a great note, I'll ask this question, since you mentioned activism. Maybe for the ones who are listening or watching, you've been at this for some time, for a while, at activism.
Mhm.
Maybe you would have some great recommendations in terms of how to talk to people and kind of change their minds on, oh, I hated cyclists and I just wanted my single family home somewhere, and I love suburbia, and I don't like public transit. How would you change those minds?
How would I change? Yeah, that's actually a good point you make. I mean, it's very hard to change people's minds, like I said, without having something to show them. But if you can almost twist public transit and cyclists in favor of these people, which is what I like to do, how can it benefit them? Cycling, adding bicycle lanes for starters, does not only protect cyclists, it protects people in their cars as well. It protects people driving, it protects pedestrians, not just people on bikes. It protects everyone. Buses take cars off the road. They shorten your commute time. They leave more city funds to maintain roads better because there's not as many cars driving on them. They wear your roads less. I mean, people on bikes, they're just another car that's not in your way. Like, that's probably the best way you can twist something in someone who's so set in their ways. You can twist it in their favor like that. That's probably how I would go about it. I'd like to tell people to be open-minded, be understanding, be courteous, but those statements can only go so far.
I like that answer a lot. I think it will be very helpful to everyone who's listening and watching.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
I think very insightful. I learned a lot. It was, I think, generations ahead, when we're old, we're going to show us to our children, and they will be proud.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Zach. It was
Thank you,
nice.
Arsen.